short story, and I tried to keep the ending as ambiguous as possible. I titled it Oh the Humanity. Hope you enjoy. There was a man, for no reason at all, he began hearing these voices. They all said the same phrases: I love you, shut up, stop, or fuck you. This happened for a day and didn't seem to be ending anytime soon. The phrases were heard when different actions would be occurring, such as when the man was in the shower, he would suddenly think of a conversation he had with his partner and he heard her voice saying stop. Puzzled, the man stopped in his tracks, let the water flow over him, and then a minute later continued washing himself and thinking about that same conversation until he heard, shut up. Once he stopped thinking about his partner, he heard someone say, fuck you. It sounded as if his neighbors were saying these phrases or that there were speakers in his house saying these phrases to him. It sounded so clear. The caveat being these voices were impossibly conversing with the thoughts in his head. At first, a multitude of voices rang out in different genders and ages, young children, teenagers, and at times adults, but one soon dominated them. A voice of a teenage male of about 13 to 15 years of age, who seemed angry that everyone was yelling the same phrases over and over again to the point of this teenager's chagrin. This continued on for days except when the man ventured outside. He began wondering if his thoughts were telepathically communicating to those around him until the teenager's voice became distorted into something completely different from what he heard in the beginning. He heard this voice saying, I love you, or fuck you, over and over and over again. It wouldn't stop. It was as if there was someone at a soundboard and continually pressing a button to replay the same voice, screaming. It was torturous not knowing why this voice was there, and the man racked his head trying to understand. He deduced that this teenager had some sort of a mental issue and was attempting to disrupt the neighborhood's airspace when the teenage voice began to sound less like a human's voice and became twisted into something that sounded much more sinister. The man began thinking that he would try his best to ignore it, no matter how difficult. He knew he wasn't going to the extreme ends of schizophrenia if he didn't listen to what the voice told him to do. If it ever came to telling him to do something psychopathic, he knew that he would have the strength to be able to resist. For he knew that serial killers and murderers sometimes heard voices which they attributed to God telling them to kill people, which he thought was quite ironic, but knew that there was no way he would listen to any voice telling him to kill anyone. He wasn't deranged like Abraham of the Bible, who was told by God to kill his son Isaac. This man thought Abraham had to be clinically insane. He began to manage his mind to hearing the voice. No matter how twisted and devious it sounded, he compartmentalized. A young girl's voice every now and then would yell, fuck you, shut the fuck up. The man named her Germania in his head, for she seemed to be stronger than her years, as he began to wonder about his sanity, giving name to voices that were having screaming matches, either in the ether of his mind or in the neighborhood. A young boy's voice then rang out after the third day asking, pleading for the person who was young, the phrases to stop. What the hell is wrong with you? He knows. Stop. Now the man was confused. He began thinking he wasn't the only one hearing it. The boy heard it too, and it sounded as if he was yelling about a block's distance away. The man began thinking he wasn't schizophrenic, but that the whole neighborhood heard the same voice. The man thought this was someone cruising around the street blaring this noise from a vehicle on loudspeaker. He knew it had to be government controlled, as there would be no way the police would have allowed such noise pollution had it not been condoned by someone first. So he began to believe that there must have been some sort of government experiment on this section of the population, in which many, perhaps all, of the population around him knew what was going on besides him. Once he understood he wasn't becoming schizophrenic, the relief was palpable. The noise moved away from the man and towards the young boy, strangely, because he wasn't broadcasting his knowledge through any means other than his thoughts. The man thought that the young boy should have just been quiet as the boy began to be the focus of this barrage of I love yous and fuck yous from the most twisted voice any horror film would have been proud to feature. It wouldn't stop. The boy began to sound deranged. He would wail as if he was losing his mind. Eventually he broke down and began screaming out that he also loved this voice. The man was very disturbed. This back and forth between young boy and teenage male voice was chilling. It wouldn't stop when the man was in the shower. It wouldn't stop when the man ate. It wouldn't stop while he was working, and it wouldn't stop while he tried to sleep. It only stopped when he left the neighborhood. When he woke up in the middle of the night, there would be silence. Then they would continue their exchange after a couple minutes. The man began to wonder how his neighbors did nothing as this young boy was losing his mind. How the young boy's parents weren't doing anything. Was this some sort of experiment you heard about being done by the CIA of conspiracy theories? Perhaps aliens? Or maybe whoever was controlling the simulation decided to implant these voices. He wouldn't dare call the police. Because if this torture was real, it wouldn't matter whether or not he reported it. So he took an objective view of what it was like for this young boy to be tortured, and combined with it the inability of everyone around to do anything while this voice tormented the boy into what seemed a catatonic state. However horrible it was, the man changed his view into this torture being a case study for what negative auditory mental stimuli could do to a boy of under 10. The man knew that the boy would no longer be the same boy as before the experiment. He would most likely be an empty shell, with the only things he heard being the voice of that deranged and distorted teenager voice. The man began wondering if he would also be able to stop hearing the voices, if it would ever stop, or if hearing the voices for the past 6 days would permanently etch its place and reverberate through his mind forever. I love you. Fuck you. Until something clicked. The young boy's voice never faltered. It stayed the same frequency and range. The voice never gave way to its vocal cords. The boy never lost his voice. And he knew then that if this were an experiment, the boy's torturous experience was also part of the experiment. And as he realized this, both voices faded away until nothing remained except sweet silence. Thoughts of nothing. Thanks.